All right, Brian, welcome to the Leaders Who Care series.
Thanks for having me on, Mark.
I see we're both dressed up really good for it. But welcome to the world the way it is right now. No, I think we'll have some fun because you're doing some fun, unique things. But the way to start would be if you could briefly introduce yourself. But I have a big asterisk, especially for men, on that. Men 99% of the time first tell me their job or what their title is of the business. That's not the question. The question is, where were you born? Where are you from? Where are you from originally? Where were you born? Where are you now? What do you feel comfortable talking about family? Do you have siblings, kids, things like that? Maybe stuff you've never told anybody before you want to reveal to the world right now. That's always fun if people sometimes do that. Just tell us a little bit about about that and who you are.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. Uh, it was a relative, pretty like upper middle class. I went to Calabasas High School. I had three siblings. Uh, you know, both my parents are Jewish. And we went to a conservative temple. Just kind of a very stereotypical, boring, valley upbringing, the San Fernando Valley, not Silicon Valley. Like I don't date 818 type of valley.
Go ahead.
Um, and when I was growing up, my parents they said to me, "You can be a doctor or a lawyer, whatever you want, a doctor or a lawyer, but don't be a doctor because the health insurance industry is a complete and total mess." And so I was like, I guess I'll be a lawyer. And
Nothing like having good.
ironically, both of my
Sorry to interrupt. Nothing like having open options.
yes, and both my parents were pharmacists, and my grandfather and my second cousin and my great uncle were all pharmacists, and my grandfather owned four pharmacies, and I grew up working in the pharmacy, and so that was a big part of my life because my mom was a manager in the pharmacy, and she worked 50, 60 hours a week, and my father had his own business as well, and he also worked 50 to 60 hours a week. So, I was one of those kind of like latchkey kids or like a free range kid. It was the old days when you went outside and like rode your bikes and got into mischief,
But no helmets
with not a lot of parental supervision. So,
and no helmets.
yes, exactly. Um, and yeah, so for most of my younger years, I thought I was going to be a lawyer. I didn't know what kind, and then I got to high school and I took computer science. And I was also really into leadership. And so I was like, I know what I want to do. I want to be a CTO of a successful software company. And I knew by the age of 15 that that's what I wanted to do. And
Wow.
then, I decided to go to Harvey Mudd College. Um, I was the guy before the first day of college because I got to school early because I ran cross country. Um, and I was in the career services office, and I'm like, how am I going to get an internship after my freshman year? And they're like, what year are you? And I'm like, I haven't, I'm a freshman. And she's like, we've never had a freshman like come in here and try to get an internship this early. And I tried really hard, but ultimately I was not successful because it was just too difficult as a freshman competing with upperclassmen to get the internships. But I did research with a professor. His name was Professor Keller, and he was a really, really important mentor to me throughout my college experience. And I took, he was my senior advisor, major advisor. I took neural nets. I took databases. I took programming languages from him. I think I had like five different classes from him. He wrote letters of recommendation for me, helped me get I got two Microsoft technical scholarships, and he was instrumental in helping me get those. I did, research with him after my freshman year, and then continued on for the next semester. And so we just were super close. Unfortunately, about 5 years ago, he passed away from a brain tumor.
Hmm.
But he was an extremely prolific, uh, computer scientist, and he worked for JPL and worked on these programming languages that were um, verifiable because when you send things into outer space, you don't have the ability to like update them very easily. And so there's a lot of things that he taught me, and I would, visited him like every year, and we go out to dinner and things like that.
Well, yeah.
Um,
Let me interrupt for a second. God, it almost sounds like Tuesdays with Maury. If you went to, have you ever read that book, Tuesdays with Maury? It's written by this Dan Album. He was an ESPN sportscaster, but he became an author, and he would visit Maury every Tuesday and talk to him, and an older gentleman. But um, I'm going to go back a tiny bit because that's fascinating. So when you were a young kid, you had two siblings, you said?
I had three siblings.
Younger, older?
Yeah, so I have an older sister and an older brother, and I have a younger brother as well.
And so what was that like? Did you guys get along? Were you into taking computers apart back then, or were you into lemonade stand entrepreneurship or singing or dancing? What were you into?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. When I was very young, when I was in second grade, I would find rocks and I would sell rocks to the kids at school.
Hmm.
And they weren't even really special rocks. After the rains, I would collect these like really colorful rocks that were near my house, and then I'd bring them to school with me. And then I would go around selling them to the other kids, and I like, made $10. And then eventually I also uh, sold candy at school, and I'd buy them wholesale and sell them retail. And I would
You were
buy these candies called Warheads.
I was going to say you were like the Candy Rock guy, basically. How do
Yeah, yeah,
or you were the first founder of the Pet Rock, except they made a lot more money on it than you did.
yeah, yeah. I didn't put like those little bobbly eyes on the rocks, like the pet rocks that you see, but um, you know, it was fun because I'd always have to figure out like how much I'm like, hey, they just bought lunch. I know they have 15 cents. Which one of these rocks do I think that they can afford? And then I'd say, here's a rock that I think, matches how much money you're willing to spend. But so I always had that sort of entrepreneurial bent. Um, and then,
Sorry, I'm a great interrupter, by the way, so you just have to go with it. But did you ever, probably you never in a million years would have imagined somebody have this marketing program that sold millions of pet rocks?
yeah, I didn't even know about the pet rock until later.
Right.
But yeah,
But
um,
I was just thinking, you see the pet rock on the shelf and they're selling millions, you're going, holy cow, I knew that.
yes, exactly. Yeah, and in high school, I sold orchids at farmers markets for my dad. So I had some
Hmm.
sales experience, even though it wasn't a major focus for me. But and I was the captain of my high school track team. I was the head captain. We had 110 people on the team. I had 10 sub captains. So
Oh.
I sort of naturally gravitated towards leadership.
Hmm.
People put me in positions where I, had some authority. I didn't necessarily ask for it, but I got put into that sort of position. I just have a natural knack for it.
What does that mean? And I've been involved in a lot of sports where I learned a ton about leadership. In your mind, how did that happen? What did you feel like when you were given that responsibility, younger even, that why it was happening? Like what did you have? Did you ever think about that?
I don't even know. I wasn't, it was more about the fact that I knew what needed to be done and I would do what needed to be done. And I would tell other people, hey, we're supposed to be doing the stretches. We're supposed to be doing this, leading by example. And so, just being somebody who, I was consistent, I was dependable, and I led by example. And I think they felt that I had integrity, and so they put me in that position.
Well, leading by example is a great way to be a leader, so because that is it's seen visibly really, really quickly. That's pretty cool. And were you good at track? I'm assuming you were good too.
Yeah, no, I was, I wouldn't say that I was the best person on the team, but I worked really, really hard. And, there were certain, track meets where I got first place in multiple events. And so, mostly through a little bit of talent, but mostly a lot of hard work and discipline, uh, I was pretty good.
Well, the best coaches and sometimes leaders, but certainly coaches are the ones that aren't the superstars. They're the ones that really grinded and worked and made it happen type of thing because they understood the game. Not in debt, not again, I'm not saying against superstars, but superstars just came so naturally that they would have a hard time coaching somebody because they get impatient if nothing else with them. So that's pretty good. Did you do stuff with your siblings? Did you get along with your siblings? Were you engaged with each other or not at all?
Yeah, I would say my older brother and I, we did not get along. We were complete and total opposites. When he was 15 years old, he was 6'2" and 220. And when I was 15 years old, I was 5'10" and weighed 130.
Oh, good.
And yes, a little bit of a difference. And we were only a year and a few months apart, and we had opposite strengths and opposite weaknesses. And so for most of my childhood, like he and I did not get along, and I got along much better with my younger brother. And we used to stay home sometimes in the summer, and we'd play like 5 hours of chess and checkers and Monopoly, or
Yeah.
video games or whatever we would do. But we would stay home and just play games together. He was 4 years younger than me, but I spent a lot of time with him. And my sister was 3 years older than me, and I didn't spend that much time with her growing up, to be honest, because she was older, had older friends, and she didn't really want to hang out with her, you know, dorky younger brothers, basically.
But she could introduce you to some girls, maybe. I don't know, but they were older than you, so at that time, probably
Yeah,
whatever.
still, yeah. we
What?
we ended up going to the same college. She went to Harvey Mudd as well,
Hmm.
and she was there. We had 1 year overlap, which was really interesting because um, my sister was very introverted, and so she was very kind of low key, and I was the complete opposite, and I was, throwing parties and very, uh, I garnered a lot of attention. I was always creating mischief, and
Wow.
so they would always go after like, hey, uh, did you know your brother did this, or your brother said that, or this happened or that happened, and so she would kind of hear about whatever things that I was doing, or whatever.
Well, that's kind of surprising considering that you said that you stayed home with your younger brother and played chess and checkers and whatnot, and then you went there and you're doing parties.
Yeah, well, I mean, I eventually kind of came out of my shell, like once I was about 16 or so. And after that point, I, was a lot more social. But before puberty, I was very, very introverted, and just like stayed home, play video games, and so forth.
So, and you said before, you were looking for internships before anybody really was a kind of president. You did do some internships. I'm just trying to remember with Microsoft, with Northrop Grumman and whatnot. How did that influence you? What experience did you get out of it? How was that?
Yeah, I mean, my first summer at Microsoft. Um, so first of all, I had developed carpal tunnel. Before I started my Microsoft internship, I worked for Northrop Grumman, and I was working 20 hours a week and going to school full time. And I was working, I was only sleeping like 6 hours a night. I was working 7 days a week. I didn't have an ergonomic setup, and it was a really tough time. Um, I ended up having to pick up the slack when one of the people on the team got pregnant, and I had a full load as well. And there was no one else on the team who could pick up the slack, and we had to, hit the deadline. Um, so I went to the doctor on campus, and he told me to take ibuprofen, and I did, which allowed me to work. But eventually, it got so bad that I couldn't work at all, even with ibuprofen. And at night, my hands would go numb, and I was super concerned that I wouldn't be able to finish college, that I wasn't going to be a programmer. And I'm like, I'm not really good at anything else. So what am I going to do? Um, so then I learned, I talked to some professors. I found out that one of my professors had carpal tunnel before, and he told me to change text editors, to get a foot pedal. And so I took all of his advice. Uh, I have this keyboard that's in two pieces. I have a vertical mouse still. I have a foot pedal so I can press control and shift with my feet. And I learned a new layout called Dvorak. And so when I went to Microsoft my first summer, I had all my equipment, and my mentor um, brought over the head of Microsoft Office, who was a 6'7", super smart guy. And he ran a team of he was responsible for this business unit, which at the time was generating $10 billion a year in revenue
Wow.
and had over 1,000 people. And he's like, I want you to meet my intern, Brian. He's got this super interesting setup. And he showed him my keyboard and the mouse and the Dvorak and the foot pedals and all these things. And that guy looked at me and he's like, oh my gosh, what a nerd. And this guy was legitimately an uber nerd, and he was calling me a nerd. And I was like, I totally did not expect that response.
Now, did he say this
And then,
out loud with everybody there?
well, it was me, my mentor, and
Okay.
this guy, Will, who is the head
Will.
of office. Yeah. So that experience at Microsoft taught me that a lot of people who work in these big corporate environments, they're, you know, I realize that I think differently than most people. And that's one of the things I learned. I learned a lot of different things. One was about having good coding standards, how to write code efficiently, but also just how I think a lot differently than most people,
Hmm.
and that I probably don't really fit in a traditional corporate environment that's very bureaucratic and siloed. When I got there, they were like, here's a spec and you're a code monkey and just write the code. And I was like, well, I want to understand, the customer,
Yeah.
what problem are we solving? Is this really the best way to solve the problem? And they're like, no, 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 no. Don't ask questions. Here's the spec. We've already solved that, and go write this code.
Boy, that
And
makes you
I didn't
that
find
makes
that
you
to
passionate.
be,
Sorry to interrupt again. That makes you passionate about what you're doing.
yeah, exactly. It was just very I'm like, it's hard for me to get excited about
Yeah.
this project if I'm not emotionally bought into it. Um, it was, they were treating me like a code monkey,
Hmm.
as I refer to it. And then my second summer, I worked in the Windows media player group, um, and it was really boring. The first summer, I was working 60 hours a week because there was an insane amount of work, way too much work to get done in a period of time. I ended up working 60 hours a week, but I've been working 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. I eventually finished, and I actually finished 2 weeks ahead of schedule. The second summer, I had the exact opposite experience. Um, I was working, 35 hours a week, and I finished the project within 6 weeks, and I was bored out of my mind. And then I took on some bonus projects, and then tried to spend my summer going wakeboarding and online dating. And I read 12 books or 15 books. on
Is that how you
entrepreneurialism.
met your wife?
No, I met my wife significantly later,
Oh,
but
okay.
I met her at like at a meetup. But nonetheless, it was just I realized that I'm not a big company guy. I'm more of a small company guy.
Yeah.
I didn't like, hey, I'm employee number 20,172. And then when you go in Seattle, if you go to a bar or a club and everyone's like, hey, where do you work? Oh, I work at Microsoft. Oh, where do you work? I work at Microsoft. It's it was just very homogenous and it was kind of boring. You
Well,
know, and
especially if you're in the city of Microsoft out there in Seattle land, there's no doubt about it. I want to talk. I love what you're saying because I want to talk about the thread of how you got and be able to spend some time talking about what you're doing now. So, those experiences, and you had some good company experiences with companies like Instamed and what's the other one I was trying to remember? Well, Pet Wireless. So you had, but then it seemed like you got even more entrepreneurial. And I guess that evolves from what you're just saying about the big corporate bureaucrat is not where you want to be. You started getting more entrepreneurial, right?
well, I was always entrepreneurial. Even in college, I was like, I would drop out of college right now, but I don't have an idea, I don't have resources, and I don't have any experience or skills. Except for those things, I'd start a company right now. But I'm like, I don't have anything better to do, so I'll finish my and get my college degree, I guess. I always thought about it like that. And
Hmm.
then, especially with computer science, you can, you know, just learn by doing and read books. You really don't need to go to college, was my view. But yeah, after college, I even during my senior year, I started working at Instamed. I was the first person hired after the two founders. I was there for 15 years. We I started, there wasn't even a single line of code written. We grew to 270 people, 75 million in annual recurring revenue before I left, and we sold it to JP Morgan for 550 million. And so that was an amazing experience, and I learned a ton. Our customers were some of the largest banks, health plans, and health systems in the country. And we had to make sure that our code was super secure and compliant and go through 7 audits a year and scale to billions of transactions a year.
So I would guess the third employee is better than 20,463rd employee. Um, so that's fascinating. And then how did you then you started becoming a co-founder and everything. How did that evolve? What happened there?
Well, the truth is that I started being a co-founder even when I was at Instamed. I told them that I had this plan. I'm going to stay there for 5 years, and then I'm going to start my own company after I make a bunch of money. But I started another company called Reasonable Development within 6 months of graduating. So
Huh.
I was working at Instamed, and then I had Reasonable Development, and there were times where I would do you know two two startups on the side. So when I started working for Findocs, for example, we started Findocs in 2016. I left Instamed in 2019. So I would wake up at 5:30 or 6 in the morning and work with engineers that were overseas and work for a few hours. Then I'd go to my day job, work, and then I'd come home, eat dinner, spend a little bit of time with the family, and then work some more. And I'd work on the weekends. So I've always been extremely industrious. When I was in high school, I had 3 jobs. I was the captain of the track team, but I also did tutoring, and I worked at a rec center, and I also worked at the pharmacy. So for most of my life, I've had multiple jobs simultaneously.
Interesting.
And even right now, I have several companies at the same time.
Yeah, that's
So,
super interesting how I always find this thread from how you're growing up, one way or another, keeps coming forward and or you find it, somehow. What was interesting? Were there certain ones that were more interesting than others?
in terms of the startups and the
Yeah,
projects,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think throughout that process, you try to think about the selection criteria, when in the early days, it was just a matter of like, hey, some experience is better than no experience. And if there's somebody who really wanted to work with me or was willing to hire me to do something, you take what you can get. And I wasn't even, you win or you learn. I spent a lot more time learning than winning in those days. But that's kind of how I saw it. And I didn't really care. I'm like, I have like a long-term plan here and I'm just getting experience. And, um, and then eventually, I was a co-founder of FinDocs and we raised a little bit under 5 million and got to 16 million in revenue and sold the company. And that was a very significant sort of, life-changing money event. And then after that, I started to think about what would make the biggest difference in my life. And it would be to improve the quality of my food because I had been diagnosed with Crohn's disease several years earlier.
Hmm.
And prior to that, I had been cooking all my meals from scratch. And so, um, I can kind of go down this road of talking about how I started my current company, Get Saucy. Um, and, I was diagnosed with Crohn's. Um, And rather than my gastroenterologist wanted me to go on Entyvio, but I didn't, I looked at the side effects and I said, no, thank you. Ironically, I worked in a pharmacy and my parents are both pharmacists and I take no medication. So I'm sort of the black sheep of the family. Um,
Well, if you have
and
pizza, as much as you like pizza, and I love pizza, if I had it 7 or 6 days a week, I would probably want a break. So I guess you saw stuff in the pharmacy that said, I don't want to have that.
yep. And so I went to a functional medicine doctor and he told me about the autoimmune protocol. Never heard of it before. And it's a diet where you eliminate the top 15 allergens, ultra processed foods. And, and the allergens are like, dairy, gluten, uh, nuts, uh, soy, sesame, eggs, and so forth. And you avoid ultra processed foods like seed oils and preservatives and artificial colors and flavors and things like that.
Hmm.
And you see how your body responds. And in my case, within 2 months, all my symptoms resolved. And I went back to my doctor and I showed him my blood test results and stool test results. And he looked at my C-reactive protein, calprotectin, lactoferrin, and IgA. And he's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Which treatment are you on? And I said, no treatment. And he's like, no, which medication? And I said, no medication. And he said, well, what are you doing? And I told him I'm doing the diet. And he said, wow, if you had these results and you're on the medication, I would be ecstatic. And I asked him, why didn't you tell me about the diet? I had to learn about it from a functional medicine doctor. And he said, well, 40 years ago, when I went to med school, I got a textbook this thick and only one page was on nutrition. And in the last 40 years, I've had only one other Crohn's patient who did a diet and got better. And I even did a colonoscopy on him and his gut completely healed. However, after about a year of cooking all his meals from scratch, he got tired of it and he went back to eating the way he was eating before. And his symptoms came back with a vengeance. And then he begged me to put him on the medication, which I did. And that's why I don't recommend the diet because I don't think it's sustainable.
Wow.
Now, if I'd been diagnosed with celiac disease instead of Crohn's disease, he would have told me to go on the gluten-free diet. But 50 years ago, doctors didn't know that if you do the gluten-free diet, that's all you need to do if you have celiac. And they were prescribing steroids and anti-inflammatories and even doing surgeries on patients.
Hmm.
If they did that today, it would be medical malpractice. And I learned also that celiac was first discovered about 2,000 years ago. And, for almost 2,000 years, doctors didn't know that all you had to do was avoid gluten. And maybe they don't know everything there is to know about Crohn's disease, for instance,
Hmm.
and all these other autoimmune diseases. So I sort of discovered this. And I also wanted to understand why, at a very, very deep level. Like, why don't doctors recommend uh, this diet? And it's because you could have two patients who have Crohn's, and one patient needs to avoid gluten and dairy, and another one has to avoid gluten and nightshades. Whereas for celiac disease, it's they already have a test for it, and then you just have to avoid one thing, and it's consistent for everybody.
Hmm.
So that was one of the reasons. The other reason is that there aren't any products on the market that make doing the autoimmune protocol easy. like there are a lot of gluten-free products today. So I kind of took that information and I just kind of kept moving forward. I cooked all my meals from scratch for 3 years. Sometimes I'd eat really boring food like sardines and white rice. Other times I go online, get a recipe, go to the supermarket, get a laundry list of ingredients, chop them up, make a giant mess, stink up my whole house. And then my wife would come downstairs and try my food and she's like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And then I'd have to eat it sitting in a corner, staring at a wall by myself because no one wanted to eat, smell, or taste my food. And about after I sold my last company, I said to myself, what would make the biggest difference in my life? And it would be to outsource the production of my food. So I went on these different websites called meetachef.com, Take a Chef, Kitchen Remedy.
Hmm.
And I said, hey, I'm on this diet. Can you make food for me? So they were dropping food off twice a week. And it was amazing because I had all this free time. I had 10 hours more free time a week. So I went sailing 20 times. I went kite surfing 4 times. I got stung by a stingray. I learned how to shoot a gun. I got my concealed carry license. I bought all new clothes, went to a dermatologist, got my teeth straightened, got my teeth whitened. My wife was like, you're going through a midlife crisis. And I'm like, she's like, how much longer is this going to last? And I'm like, I don't know. I think I can keep this up for another 5 years. I'm having fun. So
It sounds
I
like a
did that for
previous
about,
part of your life where you also had time to do this and this and this and this and this well, in your spare time. Um, Crazy.
yes.
And
So then,
so,
yeah, go ahead.
is that how you got Get Saucy going to make it taste better?
So then after 3 years of that, um, I
Wow.
said, now what? What's my next goal? I've accomplished all of my other goals. And I said, I really want to have chicken tikka masala. So I talked to chefs with 20 years of experience and I said, can you make me chicken tikka masala with no dairy, no tomatoes, no cumin, and no seed spices? And they said, that's impossible. You're crazy. Just stop. And I said, next. And then I talked to some other chefs and they said, I don't know if it's possible, but I'll try. And I paid them and they made me something, but it didn't taste anything like tikka masala. And so eventually I was introduced to my co-founder, Suhan, and I learned that he worked at 6 Michelin star restaurants. He went to the International Culinary Center in New York. He was the head of production for Aquila Barbecue and took them from 1.5 to 11 million in sales and made their barbecue sauce. And he worked in the executive dining program at JP Morgan for 6 years and made meals for the CEO, Jamie Dimon, US presidents, and foreign dignitaries. And then he had a private catering business in Long Island, New York, and made wedding receptions and dinner parties and birthday parties for super wealthy people, but who had Crohn's disease and different autoimmune diseases.
Hmm.
And so I asked him to make me 3 sauces in 3 months. One had to be tikka masala. And instead of 3 sauces, he made me 8 sauces. And when I tasted the tikka masala, it reminded me of my first date with my wife, where I took her to my favorite Indian restaurant. And it was sort of like in the movie Ratatouille, which I've seen like 50 times with my daughter, where the critic eats the ratatouille and it flashes back to his childhood. He falls off the bike and his mom makes him the ratatouille. And then
Hmm.
he goes into business with the chef who turned out to be a rat. And I went into business with a chef who turned out to be a Suhan. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. But what if Suhan doesn't want to cook for me anymore, or God forbid gets hit by a bus? He lives in Long Island, New York. I live in Irvine, California. He is shipping me the sauces in the mail. And so I said, I have to create a company and put the recipes in the company and control the means of production so I can have all my favorite foods for the rest of my life and live symptom free without medication. And so I did not choose to start this company. The company chose me.
Pretty saucy story. Couldn't resist. Yeah, that's amazing. It's amazing, and it's not amazing how things in life give you reasons and purpose to do something. Does your family eat with Get Saucy?
Yeah, there's several of the meals that my family will now eat with me. Like we'll have like a taco night and we'll all eat tacos together, which is super fun. Sometimes they'll have like we do all the sampling together. So we do the sensory evaluation. I'm the CTO of Get Saucy, which stands for Chief Taste Officer.
Of course.
Whereas in my previous companies, I was the Chief Technology Officer. But my wife and I, and my stepson and my daughter will try the different products before they get approved and we produce them. And part of it is that it has to remind me of the flavors that I haven't had and trigger that memory.
Sure.
Because if it doesn't do that, then it's not good enough.
So
Um,
do you have
and
your wife
so
and do you have your wife and the kids on the payroll as chief testing officer one, two, three, and four?
yeah, no, they're not on the payroll, but my wife is actually helping with the business now. She helps with marketing, and she actually was helped come up with the name Get Saucy. But she helps with the marketing stuff.
Was that the name, or was that just one evening she said that?
Hmm. Well,
I'm
no,
kidding.
yeah. We spent some time thinking about names. The actual name of the company is HTWTF, which stands for Heal the World Through Food. And Heal the World is Tikkun Olam, which is part of my religion, Judaism. And so, I want to help people who have trouble sticking to their restrictive diets, who don't like to cook like me or aren't very good at it. Um, but I had this original goal of just making these sauces and making them available to people online. But over time, the scope of the company has grown significantly. And we found that, because our products are 100% organic, all natural, people who just want to eat clean want them, people who are recovering from surgery. Um, there's so many different use cases that people have beyond what I initially conceived of. And then we sort of, discovered all the challenges of sourcing organic ingredients and learning about how the synthetic pesticides and herbicides like glyphosate and picloram and how they've been attributed to colon cancer and um, microbiome disruption
Hmm.
and gut dysbiosis and so forth, and realizing that the mission here is so much bigger. The sauces are sort of the linchpin to culinary medicine or lifestyle medicine. They're the delivery vehicle for nutrient density and flavor and cultural resonance. And so, what I do is I just cook some protein, I add the sauce, and I make a carb in like 15 minutes, and I have a delicious meal for my whole family. And pretty much anybody can do that. And even schools that don't have the equipment that they used to have, or senior living facilities, or hospitals, or colleges and universities, or people at home, now they have something that, is simple, easy to cook, accessible. It's going to be, we're going to make it even more affordable, and it's healthy. So it's something that hadn't existed before. People thought you had to choose between health or flavor. And my wife and we got into this discussion like 10 years ago at a Laker game. And I said, why don't they have healthy food that tastes good? And she said, because what makes food taste good is sugar, fat, and salt. And those are also the things that make it unhealthy. And if
Right.
they could make healthy food taste good, they would have already done it. And the fact that it hasn't been done means that it's not possible. And I said, I don't believe that. Um, optimists get rich, but skeptics seem smart. And I'd rather be an optimist. And so I just have this very optimistic perspective that things can be different and that we can figure out a way to make it work, um,
Well,
even if someone
that's
hasn't
ex
made it work.
and it's brilliant. That's what we started Leaders Who Care to be, that there's no impossible. You can make money and do good at the same time. You can eat something that tastes good too and is healthy for you also at the same time. Um, I know you got another business too, but as they say in LA, you're in California, you kind of get this, you leave them wanting more so we can do a sequel. So we may have to do a sequel on the other one. But I'm fascinated by what you're doing with Get Saucy and everything you've done actually. And but I do have one more question though. With everything you've been through, everything the world's been through with COVID and so on also, what are you most grateful for and what are you most hopeful for?
Yeah, I would say I'm extremely grateful for my team, that I've been able to pull together people with a diverse set of skills and talents and experience who really care about making a difference and trying to change the food, medicine, industrial complex. Um, I'm grateful for Suhan. Without him, none of this would be possible. Everybody said it was what I was trying to do, make a tikka masala without, tomatoes and dairy is impossible. And then we're working on a hot sauce without capsaicin. People said that's impossible, can't be done. It defies, everything we know about taste and heat and everything else. So there's just been one thing after another where we've just been, breaking through glass ceilings of what people thought was possible.
And what are you most hopeful for?
Well, I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to change the food system, be able to make organic food more economically viable for the farmers, but also much more accessible to the end users. And the way that we're doing that is that because when we take the organic produce, we convert it into purees. So we don't necessarily care if it's perfectly shaped.
Right.
We can buy both the grade one and grade two, et cetera, from the organic farms and contract with them ahead of time, which makes it a lot more economically viable for them because it's very difficult for them to sell their produce to the grocery stores where people are comparing them to the conventional product. And the yield of grade one is, less in general than conventional product. But as I said, we can accept it because if it's nutrient dense and it's good, healthy product, it can be consumed and turned into a puree. And in reality, we actually are selling the same quality ingredients that's used in organic baby food, which are these organic purees of vegetables, is the same grade quality of product that we serve to people who buy our products.
Yeah, I love it, and probably saving a lot of waste too, where they might throw out stuff because it doesn't look good. Well, I will tell you this: I'm grateful. I actually think I'm grateful and hopeful for the same thing. First, I'm grateful to have a new friend. That's always important, and I'm grateful and hopeful because you really are a leader who cares, and the whole story, how it got you to this point. I don't believe things like this happen by accident, but I do believe that they happen and appear, and then you have to take advantage of them. And that's what you did. So thanks for being a leader who cares, and thanks for being on the series.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate you.